welcome.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself? Perhaps you can talk a little bit about yourself. Of course, you're Malaysian, and also you did your undergrad in AA, and after that you further study masters in AA as well. So yeah, you can talk about a little bit about yourself.
I will. Hello, my name is Ele Mun, and I mean it's been like a year and a half, but I think Gary, you and I will pretty much agree to calling ourselves fresh graduates in the grand scheme of things. I have been based in London since 2015, and my understanding of architecture in Malaysia is it's mostly based on my 1 year working there. So I think still a lot of work to do on that front. But it was an incredible year. I think I spent working with Tatsing and Wei Ping and all of the good people over at Data Wowe. It was an experience that I always describe as something very special to me. And now I work in a relatively larger firm based in London, which I'd like to think offers a different kind of special. And I'm interested in reuse. I've worked with or dabbled with material reuse as a student through 2-year-long research projects. And I mean, dare I say, professionally, very shortly thereafter. And I was in a very let's say privileged position to have been taught by people who I and many other people would consider to be at the forefront of this research. They're called Roto. They are a design cooperative based in Brussels, and they engage with the circular economy and material reuse on a kind of high level, theoretically through publication, exhibitions, and in academia as well. And they also engage with it with their very own hands, kind of dismantling tiles and cleaning them and preparing them for reuse, and kind of always switching between these two different modes of working. Well, different, but maybe not so different modes of working. And yeah, very privileged to have been kind of taught by them and to have inherited even a little bit this way of thinking and this way of working. But I think it's very important for us to understand the difference between reuse and recycling. So for example, let's say I give you a roof tile. Right? If you're reusing it, you're using it as it is. You're preparing the foundations to use that material as it is, through and with the minimal kind of additional processing. You might wash it, you might kind of spray it down. Sometimes not even. You just use it as its own, but it retains its kind of value as it is.
So it means the roof tile is still a roof tile.
Exactly. But then when you recycle something, as often an additional process. In the case of roof tiles, you'll be kind of crushing it down into bits and kind of using it as a more generic material. You might crush it down and just use it as I don't know, gravel, paving, for example. So and this additional process, it sometimes, for example, in the case of with steel beams, you might melt it down. So sometimes it's kind of generating additional some more like greenhouse gases or whatnot as well. So we have to be I think quite very careful about this distinction between reuse and recycling, and that the reason that there's a specific reason why the three kind of famous R's are in a sequence. Reduce, reuse, recycling. Always try to kind of retain the material as high up in that hierarchy as possible and to work with the specificity that the material introduces. Still, I mean, like, recycling is still very much preferred over like not recycling at all. It's like I guess it's the effort that counts, and it's the fact that you're at least kind of doing something about it, doing what you can. And yes, obviously there's that. It's quite hard to actually reuse something, like you said. When you're dismantling something, it takes so much time and so much money that most people will think, oh, okay, you might as well just kind of use a new brick. But carbon, if we're talking about carbon footprints at least, a salvaged brick already exists. Right? All it takes for us to reuse it is to chip off the mortar and that is often manual labor, right? As opposed to kind of creating a new brick, and for the new brick, the clay to kind of go through the firing process and all that. So that's definitely a difference in carbon footprint. And I mean the carbon it takes to transport that material from one place to the other. Oftentimes it's a lot less than making new materials.
It's a provocative idea to talk about materials rather than designing a building with plans or elevation and everything, but rather I think this video is kind of like your project-ish. But I mean, of course, you did the video, and also the outcome come out with the brick, the bench, the one built not too far from, I think just in front of V&A. So maybe you can share about the title so that we can.
I think I will kind of describe this project a bit more in a dry way, because if you watch the video, I mean we've kind of been around and we've interviewed a lot of people who are a lot closer to these materials than I am. So they have they're a lot more attached, and they've kind of explained it a lot more beautifully than I ever will. So watch the video if you can. But this project was I was involved a lot more as an observer than anything. I was producing a documentary, and in terms of design, I have minimal involvement there. That's mostly done by Odeline Dulaire and Juliet Haysom.
I mean, of course, there are architects who are really keen to preserve it, therefore place some effort and time to really tell the demolition company and say, hey, I need this, so that you need to be careful. Otherwise, a lot of time when it comes to demolition, or even looking back when I was in Glasgow, there are a few houses, they don't care, they just explode it and that's it. You know, that's because they place more prospect and also hopefulness in the new project rather than the existing project. So now coming back to yourself, perhaps you can give a short definition or your understanding of resilience. Not about architecture or even beyond architecture.
Just resilience in general. Okay. I think resilience is it's tenacity, and resilience is the ability to be adaptable in the face of circumstances, and it's also the kind of patience to try and do what you can, especially at times where it feels like whatever you do will never be enough. And I think for me a really helpful way to think about resilience is to place it in opposition to the word resistance. So to be resistant, to resist something is to kind of build a wall and to kind of fight against something, and it's to kind of shut yourself away from the problem even if the problem persists or worsens, right? Whereas to be resilient is to in a way kind of invite the problem in and to kind of live through it and to find ways of living with it, and that you start to kind of I guess learn from the problem itself, and to kind of prepare yourself for the worst, which is inevitably to come. And I think in that sense, resilience as a notion is a lot more sustainable than resistance is, because it implies that learning curve, which I think is quite important.
Speaking of resilience, in you reusing materials, there are a few factors. Perhaps you can elaborate in environmental, which we mentioned earlier, talking about like carbon footprint is very data-ish and also statistic-ish. Second thing is about when we talk about human memories, this kind of identity of a place making, and also I think the third one is much more on political side, where what are the certain policy or regulations that encourage architectural designers or practices to use more reused materials, or what are the obstacles that's stopping practices from using
I think
quite a big question.
No, of course. But let's say we look at the London Plan.
Yes.
Right, which is the guidance, more guidance than it is a policy.
Right.
If you look through its guides and if you kind of speak to its people, it starts with kind of defining what the circular economy is.
Right.
And they're very aware of this kind of difference between like reuse and recycling. And it's quite evident.
Yeah.
That they prefer reuse over recycling, over that kind of additional processing and whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But then, as you go on in their policy, there's something which they're trying to implement now, which is I forgot exactly what it was called, but basically for larger projects, you have to kind of come up with a circular economy statement, to kind of demonstrate how much materials you're kind of reusing or recycling, right? But in that form that you're supposed to fill out, there's no distinction between recycling and reuse.
Okay, so technically, when they say this is a requirement, it doesn't really matter how many percent of recycle, how many percent of reuse.
Yeah, exactly, and that makes no difference because for large projects in London, you often get recycling rates of up to like 90-95% anyways. So it makes no difference, right? But if you enforce, like, let's say, okay, you need to reuse 20% of the materials that you have over here,
right?
Then it might make a little bit of difference, but at the same time, that's a little bit of a slippery slope,
right? Because
it depends. It's completely circumstantial as well,
right?
And it's completely legitimate that sometimes some materials are just completely not fit for reuse, which obviously kind of leads on to the subject of warranty as well.
Yeah,
which is always a huge discussion in the reuse circle. That you're not able to kind of get a warranty for a material past its first life. You look at the many kind of different stages and work stages involved in the act of building, and along each of the way you kind of find like a lot of bottlenecks.
Yeah.
To the kind of more efficient use of materials, and that was really the basis to my final year project.
Right.
It kind of walks the audience through all of the different stages, and it points out some bottlenecks, and it makes a series of propositions, and all of these propositions are kind of overlooked by a public arm, which I have quite easily called the London Unbuilding. You know the rebar stages?
Yeah.
Where's the demolition in there?
There's none. It's before stage 0. Right?
Yeah, before stage 0, it's like it's somewhere in between, like stage 3 and stage 4.
Yeah, construction stage.
Like it's very vague. So the idea of that project was to kind of find grounds within the existing work stages and to expand demolition into a more kind of comprehensive circle that allows for material reuse to become more viable for contractors, demolition contractors, architects, and homeowners, these salvage deals are very much a very central part of the project. You have these like literal fields of materials ready to be reused, and the project and the public arm is in a way trying to activate that stock. A lot of the bottlenecks behind reuse, they're completely logistical. And it almost has nothing to do with design, right? Well, it has a little bit to do with design.
More like project management side.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing, like if I throw you a bunch of materials and I ask you to make something out of it, you're gonna find a way. Like architects are incredibly adaptable. That's the whole notion behind design. You're gonna find a way to kind of make good use out of it. The first question is whether or not you have the space and the time to kind of be able to work around that. So all these bottlenecks are completely logistical, and again, that goes back to the point about like being multidisciplinary. Yeah. To kind of tackle these issues.
I do have a last question. Something quite related to you personally, perhaps. After your research and after your study, did you find anything that relates to you in your personal lifestyle? For example, you start to aware about recycling materials.
Not feel like recycling is completely futile, because you recycle something and they say they're gonna recycle it, but 99% of the time it's just gonna get shipped to Malaysia or something.
Yeah.
God knows where our waste is makes their way onto. But you still kind of do what you can given the circumstance, and it kind of pushes you into a kind of different mode of thinking.
Yeah,
it's more about that than actually recycling.